Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Today I want to take a quick look at Audrey Horne and the Tale of Two Coops. A friendly warning to all, if you aren't caught up on all things Twin Peaks, there will be spoilers in this video, so viewers, please be warned.
My name's Audrey Horne.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Dale Cooper. This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I've had, I can't tell you how many cups of coffee in my life, and this is one of the best.
Agent Cooper loves coffee.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
But Agent Cooper likes his coffee black.
Black as midnight on a moonless night. Pretty black.
Good morning, Colonel Cooper.
Just agent, Audrey. Special agent.
Special agent. I know sometimes I get so flushed. It's interesting. Do your palms ever itch?
Please have a seat. And would you write your name down for me? Audrey, that perfume you're wearing is incredible.
Tall, dark, and handsome stranger falls madly in love with me, takes me away to a life of mystery and international intrigue.
Audrey, there's something you'd like to tell me.
There is?
You mean the FBI agent? Dream on.
Maybe. Men go there.
What about women?
Women, work there.
Audrey.
Audrey, that rightward slant in your handwriting indicates a romantic nature. A heart that yearns. Be careful.
Don't make me leave. Please, don't make me leave.
When Twin Peaks started, the chemistry between Audrey Horne and FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper was incredible. Audrey had daddy issues, Cooper had white knight syndrome, and together, they appeared to be a perfect match in the making. Save for the fact Audrey was still a high school teenager, and it would have been a little inappropriate for Cooper to pursue her romantically. Audrey was forbidden fruit, and Cooper knew this. And when put to the test, Cooper's decent side ultimately won out.
Audrey, you're a high school girl. I'm an agent of the FBI.
So do you want me to leave or what?
Well, you're everything that a man wants in his life. But what you need right now, more than anything else, is a friend.
It's important to reiterate, Cooper's decent side won out here. We know Cooper lusts for Audrey, at least on some level, because he admits as much, and I don't think he's lying here.
When a man joins the Bureau, he takes an oath to uphold certain values. What I want and what I need are two different things, Audrey.
Ultimately, Cooper's white knight syndrome comes into play when Audrey gets in over her head. And the reason she gets in over her head is because she's trying to help Cooper. But her efforts to impress him and aid in his investigation lead her into real danger. So Cooper breaks his code, the very same code he cited when rejecting Audrey's advances, and Cooper goes outside his jurisdiction to save her. And incidentally, Cooper also broke his code, less justifiably I might add, when the Bookhouse boys held Bernard Renault captive after finding him with an ounce of cocaine. Fortunately for Cooper, he gets big assists here from Harry Truman, and especially from Hawk. And ultimately they save Audrey, but people are killed in the process. At this point in the story, I don't think it necessarily would have been inappropriate for Audrey and Cooper to have had a passionate encounter. I tend to think it would have been inappropriate earlier, but with the intense rescue and the deepened bond between them, and knowing that Audrey had daddy issues and Cooper swooped in like the white knight that he is, a romantic encounter would have made sense here. But it didn't happen, and instead of naturally being drawn closer together than ever, Cooper and Audrey pretty much went their separate ways, with Cooper later becoming interested in Annie, and Audrey becoming involved with Love 'em and Leave 'em Wheeler. So when Twin Peaks came to a premature, abrupt ending, there were many frustrating cliffhangers, and Audrey and Cooper were each separately involved in the two most frustrating of the bunch.
I see no problem here. If you'll excuse us, please.
Sure.
How's Annie? How's Annie? How's Annie?
So all these years later in season 3, Cooper and Audrey do not have a single scene together. But despite that fact, their fates are still deeply intertwined and integral to the story. So even though they weren't in any scenes together, we still know about the heinous act committed by Mr. C and the byproduct, which is Richard. I think it's important to stop for a moment and remember that Mr. C and Agent Cooper both constitute opposite elements of the same entity. Lynch has gone on record stating this in the past, but he even showed us a visual representation of this in The Return, when the fireman showed Andy a really cool picture show. So Mr. C isn't just some dark evil version of Cooper. He actually represents the darkness that was always present in our beloved Special Agent Dale Cooper. It's just that his good side was the one we saw calling the shots. So when Cooper went into the lodge to save Annie in vintage White Knight fashion, his desire to save her split him into polar opposite versions. His evil side won out here, and the evil side escaped the lodge first. Bad Coop wants to brush his teeth, and we get the horrifying revelation that Bad Coop has formed a union with Bob. The first thing Mr. C does when leaving the hospital is he violates Audrey, and we always knew Cooper lusted for Audrey on some level. He admitted as much, and even if he didn't, his body language and mannerisms always gave him away. So the acts of violating Audrey, and also likely violating Diane, these things fit with the context of what we know about Bob from his time spent with Leland. But those two accounts of sexual assault aside, we have strong evidence from very early on that Mr. C was the one steering the direction of this evil union. We know from the final dossier that Mr. C killed Leo, that he looked for any information that Wyndham left behind, and that he tormented Major Briggs, as Mr. C was seeking information that he could use for his long-term survival. But even without the final dossier, Season 3 provides evidence that the Dougie Tulpa first came into existence in 1997. I tend to believe this means that Mr. C was the one controlling the action and calling the shots, and that Bob was more of an enabler who granted Mr. C a sort of supernatural access. Bob made it so that Mr. C could access places like the Dutchman's, but also so that he can call upon the aid of the woodsman as needed. I also strongly believe that Bob was perfectly happy with this arrangement, and that if Bob wanted out, he had the perfect opportunity to do so when Ray shot Mr. C. But Bob looked really happy, and he wanted to stay. It's a symbiotic sort of relationship where Bad Coop is ultimately calling the shots, and Bob is providing a supernatural edge. And Mr. C was awfully busy. He was creating tulpas, setting traps for the good Coop, hiring assassins. He had all sorts of criminal connections, and his main goal was to get the coordinates and find Judy. I don't know what Mr. C was ultimately hoping would happen if he found Judy, but I can only venture to guess that finding her would have been similar to Sauron reacquiring the ring, which I believe essentially would have turned Mr. C into some type of powerful god.
Where'd you see that picture?
My mom had it.
Who's your mom?
Audrey Horne. And your name's Cooper.
Mr. C was all too happy to use his son Richard as bait. And in one of the only scenes where Richard Horne showed any type of remotely redeeming quality, you can tell from that encounter that Richard knew Mr. C had hurt his mother. And I think Richard's words also act as a tell that Audrey knew Cooper was the father, that she knew the horrible thing that had happened to her on some level. Whatever you make of Audrey's predicament in The Return, I think one thing everyone can agree on is that she was broken. She was not the same Audrey we had known and loved, and she had lost something that she was likely never getting back. Mr. C ultimately finds the coordinates, And in the end, he was so very close to completing his goal. But in uncharacteristic fashion, the fireman directly intervened in a way we had never seen before. Mr. C did everything right, but he was ultimately cheated. Instead, the Giant's plan played out, and all good Coop wound up doing was placing the ring on his doppelganger's finger. So Cooper is made whole again, and for someone suffering from a major case of White Knight syndrome, Cooper has to be one of the worst White Knights in history. He failed to save Wyndham's wife, Caroline, and he effectively ruined the lives of Audrey, Annie, and perhaps also Diane. So what's the first thing Cooper does when he's made whole again? He goes off on a totally new White Knight mission, apparently to save Laura Palmer, by going back in the past to change it. His entire motivation here is suspect and very questionable, and I'll get back to this a little later. By changing the past, Cooper effectively changed everyone's past, his own included. I believe Lynch gave us a glimpse of this transition at the end of Part 7 in the diner. I think this represented the split, and I think that also coincides with when Sarah went wild and tried smashing Laura's photo. We could see the people inside here, and some people there are in one shot and not in the other, and those that are there in both shots are sometimes in different seats. I tend to believe this is the moment that we saw with Audrey at the Roadhouse. But unlike the folk at the diner, whose lives don't seem drastically altered by Cooper changing the past, Audrey is in an entirely different place, and she looks mighty confused. Remember when Jeffries told Cooper that Gordon would remember the unofficial version? I'm thinking that Audrey Horne is another one who will likely remember some aspects of the unofficial version. And I think she will have memories of her son named Richard, who doesn't even exist in the new official version. And Lucy is another one I suspect might have some memories or connection with the unofficial version, because Lucy was the one who ultimately identified the real McCoy, although in truth, I think it's important to remember that they are both parts of the real McCoy. Mr. C and Cooper are both parts of the original Agent Cooper. It's just that in seasons 1 and 2, Agent Cooper's good side tended to win out. And that brings me to my final point, and why I think coffee is something that perhaps provides a huge clue into interpreting everything.
Agent Cooper loves coffee.
Black as midnight on a moonless night.
Pretty black.
This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. Damn good coffee. And hot.
Dougie!
Hi! I've had, I can't tell you how many cups of coffee in my life, and this is one of the best.
Would you like a cup of coffee?
No, thanks. I'm all right.
Where are you?
We're just entering Twin Peaks city limits. Is the coffee on?
Coffee?
Notice how the good side of Cooper loves coffee almost to the point of absurdity. There are countless examples of this, both with classic pre-split Coop and also with Dougie Coop and the awakened Good Dale. But after the two Coops reunited as one, this version of Cooper orders a coffee, so the good side of Coop is definitely there, but he doesn't seem all too excited about the coffee. This strongly suggests that there is an inner struggle going on here, and I believe this indicates that Mr. C is the one who has the edge. Let's remember, Mr. C was the one who was seemingly calling the shots during his partnership with Bob. So Mr. C has some big experience points here, and we know Coop's good side didn't always win out, as evidenced by the incident with Bernard Renault. I believe Mr. C is once again calling the shots here. And this all goes back to why would Cooper want to change the past in the first place? What if it's because Mr. C is still trying to find Judy? And why wouldn't Mr. C win this inner battle of wills at this point? And if Mr. C isn't winning the battle of wills, then why the hell did Cooper want to change the past to begin with?
Want
not need.
What I want and what I need are two different things, Audrey.
I don't need anything, Ray.
What I want and what I need are two different things.
I want. And I want that information.
So while I have heard many different interpretations of the final scene where Laura screams, I don't think I've ever heard any that viewed this as the final winning move from Mr. C. That by bringing Laura back to the Palmer house, that Mr. C, at long last, had finally reached his long-desired coordinates. Are Mr. C and Judy now united as one all-powerful evil divine entity? Whatever the case may be, I am genuinely itching for more Twin Peaks, and no amount of scratching will ever suffice. I'll always be itching. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful night.